Sustainable buildings are critical to a future that is socially just, ecologically restorative, culturally rich, and economically viable. Despite over a decade of strategies and programmes, progress on built environment sustainability fails to address these key issues. Consequently, the built environment sector needs to adopt net positive, regenerative sustainability thinking. The Restore project advocates, mentors and influences for this vision through working groups, training schools, events and short-term scientific missions. The aim of Restore is for buildings to have a positive, regenerative environmental impact. They should do more good instead of less bad. Restore's workflow is centred on analysis, increasing awareness, mentoring and dissemination. This method is conducted across 5 working groups. 1. Restorative sustainability. 2. Restorative design process. 3. Restorative buildings and operations. 4. Rethinking technology. And 5. Scale jumping. Restore fosters collaboration and knowledge sharing in Europe and beyond to grow ideas and advance questions in its specific field of investigation. Restore's wide network encompasses over 160 participants from 40 countries and around 100 organisations. Its multidisciplinary approach covers over 40 different expertise, including sustainable design, green buildings and urban planning. Restore aims to become the first carbon-neutral EU-funded project and has delivered various outcomes including booklets, training schools, articles and conferences.
Afternoon and welcome back. My name's Anne Vanna and I'm taking over hosting this afternoon session, and I think we are now over to a presentation from Roberto. Is that correct, Martin? Brilliant. Wonderful. Right, thank you.
So I guess you can see now. Yeah, so thank you very much for inviting me in presenting the results of the activities in Working Group 4 of the Resource Cost Action. And the title of the working group was Rethinking Technology. So we tried to move from principles and approaches, methodologies to technologies. And you can see the authors of the contents of this presentation that I'm doing. And yeah, so the main objective of the working group was to explore the potential and the impact of technologies for a regenerative indoor environment, both in new and existing buildings. So we started defining what a regenerative indoor environment is, and then try to understand kind of technology solution sets could be used in order to achieve a regenerative indoor environment. And of course, I mean, from one side, we evaluated the benefits, so the well-being and the satisfaction of the building occupants. On the other side, there's the use of natural sources in order to produce the technologies. And we try to understand how to balance these two aspects. So from one side, the positive and regenerative result. On the other side, the use of natural sources that must be continuously regenerated. So there are some circular approaches and procedures in order to, as I said, regenerate the natural sources. We started from 5 main questions. And so, as I already said, what is a regenerative indoor environment, first of all? And then we asked ourselves, is it univocal or can there have different nuances? How technologies can contribute to achieve a regenerative indoor environment? The fourth question was, what is a good set of solutions for a regenerative indoor environment, taking into account, as I said, the benefits and the impacts? And then what should be the impact of a regenerative technology? So kind of possible impacts of technologies. that are not only from the environmental point of view. Starting from the first question related to the definition of a regenerative environment, we defined, we analyzed, evaluated, investigated, and finally identified a set of key performance indicators. Sorry, I heard some background noise. I don't know who has the microphone switched on. So, as I said, we identified a set of key performance indicators that were thought as a sort of drivers in order to guide the design process and decision making in the design process. And the main scope of the design process we had in mind were the health of the building occupants as well as their well-being. So we created a sort of I would define it knowledge framework with 5 environmental aspects. So indoor air quality, hydrothermal environment, visual environment, acoustic environment. These are the classic, let me say, standard indoor environmental quality aspects. And then we added to them the human nature environment. And we also identified some sub-aspects related to the main environmental aspects. And so going more in detail, for example, for indoor air quality, kind of contaminants, outdoor air, and so on and so forth for the others. So temperature, the lighting, and so on and so forth, as I said. And for each sub-aspect, we also, or for each aspect, sorry, we also identify the occupant satisfaction as kind of a topic to be investigated and to be analyzed. So we introduced both objective aspect as well as subjective aspects, so related to the perception of the occupants. And for each sub-aspect, we tried to identify key performance indicators. Some of them are directly measurable through instruments and different tools, available tools. In relation to the occupant satisfaction, of course, the main indicators is the percentage of satisfied people. And we try to measure the percentage of satisfied people through qualitative analysis, mainly interviews, as well as surveys in a post-occupancy evaluation process. The idea was to put the occupants of the building at the center and then starting consider their well-being in order to evaluate a regenerative indoor environment. We defined thresholds. You can find in the slide as well as in the final booklet. We defined it. At the end, I will give you the reference in order to download the booklet. And so there are different thresholds that are, of course, these are sort of average thresholds. As I was saying, the comfort is something related to the human perception, and this subjective. So it's something that, I mean, it depends on the different people working or living in a building. And then these thresholds are, let's say, sort of range more than specific and very precise numbers. And we performed a quite extensive literature review in order to find the best range in order to include different answers by different building occupants. So continuing with this concept, the second question was if the regenerative indoor environment was sort of univocal concept or can have different nuances. And of course, the indoor environment is something created by a designer, having a specific background and creating for specific people. If different people live or work in a building, this can create different level of satisfaction. So also in the literature and in the past years, there were, let's say, sort of modification also of the standard parameters identify a very good indoor environment. In this example, I just reported the temperature, but could be, and we will see, could be the same for the other parameters. We are studying this aspect in this Horizon 2020 project. The name is Cultural E, and the concept is the building quality and the indoor environmental quality of building is in a way affected not only by the climate conditions, but also from the other characteristics of the context in which the building is, and including also the cultural aspect. So as is reported in this slide produced by colleague Lorenza Pistore, there's the occupants and I mean its behavior affect the indoor environmental quality, and the other way around, the environmental quality affect the behavior of the building occupants. And there are so many differences that is very challenging producing a specific and precise set of values identify a regenerative indoor environment. And then I mean how the building technologies can affect the regenerative indoor environment. And I'm referring both to the constructive technology as well as technology related to the HVAC system or related to the finishing, the indoor finishing, affecting the aesthetic, but also the perception of the building occupants. And in order to find the technologies and to analyze and evaluate the technologies, we move from environmental aspects, something related to the indoor building physics, to functions to be solved. So related to the indoor air quality, for example, the function is to remove or to absorb pollutants and to change the air in the room. Related to the agrothermal environment, to provide desirable indoor conditions, and so on and so forth, as reported. So we identify the different functions, and from the function we evaluate the technologies related to mainly to these three aspects. So the building envelope, to interior elements, and active building system, including HVAC, lighting, renewable energy sources technology, as well as building management and building controls components. And so we evaluated different technologies, and we collected all these technologies in a repository. And at the end, this repository is a database of best practices. And at the moment, it is not yet open. We are still working on that. And so, I mean, I reported this link optimistically, but I mean, we are not ready to share the repository. Of course, it's not meant to be exhaustive, and the idea is that the repository can be and should be continuously updated and could continuously growing up. This is more or less the shape of the repository. So there are the environmental aspects I mentioned at the beginning, the functions to be fulfilled by the technologies, and then a list of technologies. This is just an example. So if you click on a specific cell, you can open a specific fact sheet. This is, for example, of this technology, self-facade system, is just an example. So this kind of system, some pictures, and can, let me say, answer to different possible functions in different environmental aspects. So can work for the air purification as well as to prevent heat loss, act as a thermal buffer, act as a thermal mass, and so on and so forth, as reported in the slide. So to sum up, related to the regenerative technologies, so we have solutions to achieve regenerative indoor environment, and there are complementary approaches for sustainable, multifunctional, and regenerative buildings. And we selected technical solution on, let's say, the way how to design a regenerative indoor environment using specific technologies, and having this repository as a way to, let's say, in a way, inspire the design process. Then, once defined the regenerative indoor environment, the further step is to assess if we actually achieve a good result. So we try to identify both post-occupancy evaluation surveys, so to collect the subjective part, as well as to identify possible field measurements, so what I defined the objective part. And yeah, there are, let's say, many kind of possible tools and instruments that we listed in the final booklet, and you can find all the references there. I don't want to go in detail now because of lack of time. And related to the human behavior, in order to collect the different approach, a different perception, I already mentioned it before. We, as I said, identify possible post-occupancy evaluation, and we described the procedures in the booklet, as well as we provided possible, let's say, template with questions to be used in actual buildings. So something that you can directly use if you go into the booklet. And so this is the kind of post-occupancy evaluation method we reported in the booklet. Yeah, this is again an example of a study performed by the Berkeley laboratory. And it is clear that considering different aspects, the answer of the building occupants could be very, very different.
1 minute left.
Yeah, I'm approaching the end. Thank you very much. Having defined the technologies, we also try to collect buildings in which the technology were used, and so we defined this atlas, and you can access the atlas through the EU Restore website. So you can go there, click on the flag and you can open a specific fact sheet for each building in which you can find all the characteristics, all the features of the buildings. Yeah, last point was how to evaluate the impact of the technology. So we move in these three aspects. So with the standard life cycle assessment, adding the life cycle costing to the environmental impact, and then also adding the social, the possible social impact of the production of the technology. So this is, in our opinion, what you have to consider in choosing specific technologies. And you can find all the information in our final booklet that you can download from the website. And yeah, just to close, this is my last slide. I do think the new European Bauhaus, Indra already mentioned it, it was a good chance in order to work on this paradigm shift. And you know, the three the three keywords introduced by the new European Bauhaus are beautiful, sustainable, and together. And I do think that in cost restore action, we already working on that. And now there's these new policies and everything to be shaped. So I do think we can all contribute to this new European Bauhaus. Thank you very much for your attention. And of course, I'm available for possible questions.
Many thanks, Roberto. Many thanks for sharing. I just wonder, the question we've been asking the other working groups is your next steps, ongoing work from the working group.
Yeah, I mean, we just discussed about the technology repository. As I said, I do think it's something quite interesting we developed, and we would like to continue to use the repository and continue to update and make the repository growing up. So that's something that we have to discuss. So who is going to put effort on that? And once it will be published, I do hope there will be also inputs coming from the users, and so that we can have further technologies including in the repository in the next. So this is to me the main follow-up of our work in the working group 4.
Brilliant. I look forward to seeing that. So many thanks, Roberto. We go to the last of the working groups, working group 5 on scale jumping, and we pop across to Belgrade, or is it Vienna? Whereabouts are you, Jelena?
Sorry, hello Martin. Now it is Vienna. I am now back in Vienna.
Brilliant. So if you'd like to share your screen.
Yes. Just a second. Okay. Hello everybody to the UK audience too. I am Jelena Brajkovich and I will be speaking about working group 5, which is concluding and final working group of Restore. So I come from the University of Belgrade, Faculty of Architecture, when almost maybe a week ago, we had also a REDI event, which really gave interesting highlights into the let's say, regenerative scene in Serbia too. Here we just continue the conversation with let's say UK also experiences, which I look forward to here in the second session. So inside of Restore, I performed the role of the VG5 WISE leader, STSM and ITC coordinator, and also open access grants coordinator. So these are all very important tools of cost actions. So if among the audience there is somebody interested in possibly attending a conference or short-term scientific vision, on which I am currently now in Vienna, should definitely apply. Unfortunately, not anymore at Restore, as Restore is finishing in 10 days, but at some other cost action relying to your own interests. So working group 5 of Restore, of course, as being the final group, had let's say challenging task of wrapping up everything that has been found and discussed in previous working groups of Restore, which you heard other working group leaders, different topics, different focuses. So we in working group 5 we just wrapped it up, all of these findings, and of course we wanted to look a little bit into the future. So that's why we introduced terms like systems thinking or scale jumping. So scale jumping, I will explain this later through some of my slides. We dealt, of course, with the scale, as this is something very important and something actually very, let's say, flexible as a term, and it should be rethought, should be rethinking about in future, or whatever the expression would be. And also the systems thinking, which is, of course, again becoming becoming more and more fundamental to development of built environments, as now all technologies, all media, all that we do, build, the way we live, all it is becoming interconnected, and we really must now, how to say, examine and maybe reinvent some directions, reinvent some connections between human nature and the built environment. So here we dealt with interactions, tools, platforms, and metrics to understand what VG5 is about and how it was functioning. You can see here the infographics, which is very clear in its structure. So first, our mission is of course exploring scale jumping potentials for neighborhood, city, and society-wide level regenerative sustainability, including of course first the analysis and then of course presenting some solutions, and at of course the end of it all actually implementation. So as I said, for scale jumping we didn't of course think only about the size, although we did think about the size, but also the quality. So in terms of size, of course, upscale area and upscale reach, and in quality, upscale research potentials in terms of new directions and interactions, upscale market potentials, and of course networks, which are becoming again increasingly important for any kind of holistic work within the built environment and design strategies. So our subtasks were very clearly defined, and we had groups working on interactions, but also specific topics between tools, platforms, and metrics, but I will come back to this also. So for the outcomes, of course, we did have this VG5 booklet, which I will present here only through a slide, and it will be soon available at the Restore website, as all the other publications. It is free and open access, and if you are interested in some of our findings, I invite you all, of course, to download it when it is ready, or you can always write to anybody of us who are working on it, me, Andras, anybody from the working group 5, to of course come to your copy of this book. So we also have sustainability special issue dedicated to only scale jumping, where we had of course highlighted topics of education, humans, component, buildings, cities, energy systems, water, materials. It is really all together in it. So we had interesting contributions here too. For short-term scientific missions, we also defined some, let's say, guidelines in what we want short-term scientific missions to focus on, and that is of course assessment tools, digital techniques, digital twins, then new economic models, and of course innovative methods, paradigms, strategies, holistic thinking, and similar. So of course one of our practical exercises was training school organized in Vienna as, let's say, most livable city. So we wanted to just build upon of what already exists as a good practice in Vienna, but also push it a little bit further through discussing and bringing in some new perspectives to the whole, let's say, urban renewal strategies in Vienna, which are very already developed, but there are still always room to improve, of course. What was interesting for Working Group 5 is that we had very specific working conditions due to the rise of the pandemics at the same time when we started our work. So I would also now thank everybody who actually participated in Working Group 5, because we had many online meetings. We have all our events have been hybrid, and also some new, let's say, topics were introduced by the pandemics to our discourse. So this is something that we actually also talked about and wrote about, and this is these new conditions of living and what does this all mean to the built environment. This is something, let's say, which was also interesting, but also misfortunate in a way that it happened anyway, but it surely did how to say, arouse many new questions in the design of proper design of the built environment. Here you can see on my slide the first page, the cover page for our book. So again, I invite you to download it when it is ready on our website, if you're interested in this guidebook for regenerative implementation. So as I said, our structure was like this. First, the interactions between all three parameters that define the built environment. That is, of course, human nature, and built environment is something in between, which has become obviously an entity for itself, behaving in a way, on its own way, and let's say sometimes even in hurt of nature or in hurt of humans. So this is definitely something that we wanted to analyze, these relationships between these in between this nexus, of course, and also some bidirectional influences and reactions. So for tools, platforms, and metrics, we have, of course, the topic of digital tools, the smart technologies, emerging technologies, which would mean of constructive technologies and built technologies. Then, of course, design frameworks, which is also very important to be also scaled up a little bit, and of course legislation and policies for green transition, all the way to our practice exercise, which was, as I said, Vienna Training School, where we also had and brought into the discourse some let's say holistic thinking, which I will refer to later in a slide dedicated to this. So just to give you a very short overview of what we were about, of course, as I said, built environment has become something, an entity of its own, and it has always been connected with the rise, of course, of new technologies and media, as of course these technologies, depending, of course, on a sector, always in a way defined the way that our built environment are developing. So through printing media, of course, we got to the moment of standardization of design. So completely, so it was the first time when we could replicate architectural images and send them everywhere around the world. So standardization of design happened with Industrial Revolution. Of course, standardization of production and manufacturing happened. So we end up also with some results, like, let's say, completely visually similar environments, or let's call them standardized environments, and many other qualities or parameters of the built environments, as we may call them that. And of course, with the rise of digital and new media, and I would say here that new media is just a term a little bit broader than digital media, as it has layers, let's say, of culture in itself. So it means that it is relying also on some parameters and some, let's say, lessons learning or thinking derived from the information technologies. It also has something to do with the development of many, let's say, cultural movements, artistic movements that were developing together with these technologies, that these technologies enabled them to happen. So, of course, all this started to happen in architecture and urban design as well. So we went into a stage of non-standard technologies, variability, emergent technologies and organic forms, customization, interactivity, and digitally supported participative design. So it is now a time of variations, of scalability, of customability, of something like newer organicity, let's call it like that, or let's say old crafts becoming, how to say, reinvented in a new way. So now we are having this possibility to really create some solutions never before that we could have think about. So this is something new that we should actually use in a good way for ourselves. Of course, one of the main and again, I would not say quality, I would say parameter that came with all of this is, of course, the connectivity. And of course, today societies are, more defined by the networking and by the behavior than by, let's say, material objects. So with networkings and high-tech environments, there is no even longer binary opposition between town and country or urban and rural. Now we have merging of many things that are possible. So what does this all mean for the built environment? So, and is this connectedness a new principle of life, as Roy Ascott calls it? Is this really an evolutionary stage in human development? Is this really navigating through all this connectivity a new skill, new vital skill for survival in contemporary society? So this is something that we must include in our future, let's say, strategies to develop in a proper way built environments. But what does this all have to do with nature and with regenerative design? Of course, we cannot we cannot go and relate to nature as we did before. We of course must let's say reinvent our relationships through also using, of course, all necessary technologies that we need in order to actually exist in a world that it is today. So the logical question would be: can technologies actually bring us back to nature? And is this nature something new? Is this something Roy Ascott called nature the second, or as I call it, a neo-nature? Or how can we actually navigate through all of these artificial and natural parameters? And is actually artificial opposite of natural or just part of it, and how we can actually design around this? So here I would like to again avert your attention to for example, something that Studio Drift thinks it is possible, and more, let's say, practices and research and hypotheses are arousing around this question, and that is: how can we actually reinvent these relationships and create meaningful connections with our natural environment, but with working, of course, with contemporary technologies? How can we harmonize these relationships in a new way, and can we be more in sync? Of course, there is some text relating to, again, the coronavirus crisis, but it is something which we must say helped us a lot through this, and this is, of course, this connectivity. And but how can we do it in a way that we can call it actually a sustainable, technologically supported, reconnected future? This is, of course, possible, and it is possible to actually live more, let's say, a healthy, more simple life, but with the proper assistance and with the proper use of technologies. And this is something that, of course, through only a multidisciplinary and holistic approach can be actually redefined in our future environments. Something that also helps a lot with topics and questions and challenges like this is for sure biofeeling design, which is becoming more and more recognized as something which should be included in all stages of design and implementation projects. And it is something that we are all more and more dealing with. It can be a long story, of course, but here I will just avert your attention to elements and attributes of biofeeling design. So it is not only about, let's say, some direct access to nature and some direct molding of, let's say, nature's presence in our built environment. And what is once said very in a nice way when me and Martin, it was in 2019, we are at the BRE conference on a biophilic design symposium, and I remember a student also mentioning that his PhD thesis is about nature, but finding a measure how much nature is enough nature, and is there actually a right way to include nature in our designs. So it is not only about nature, but also about parameters that make us, how to say, feel natural. And this is geographic connection to place, historic connection to place, ecological, cultural connection, something that we call generating the spirit of place or avoiding placelessness. And also some, how to say, psychological and mental dimensions that we want to actually create in space, and that is prospect and refugee, order and complexity, all these things that we actually need in space, and which are, how to say, embodied in us, in our physical, physiological, and also mental, let's call it body or whatever dimension of our existence. So
okay,
also here.
1 minute, please, Jelena.
What? Sorry, Martin.
1 minute, please.
Yes. Aha, to the end, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, here then I will just, I was also at the end of this actually small overview. So just to go back to our book, in our first, let's say, triangular analysis, we dealt through the patterns that we very much use in more and more of our research. Also from our research, Restore 2030 emerged, which is now a publication of its own, a toolkit for educators. Martin will say also more about this if it is needed. Also, we offer some scale jumping interventions. Then we, of course, dealt with all the other bidirectional influences. You can see here also very interesting topic of scale, and can actually urban acupuncture and smallness create very big impact in our built environments. Then digital tools that you have been, of course, certainly already heard about from other leaders. Then we had smart technologies in context of regenerative design, of course, all this data and information design that can help us. Then some provocative ideas amongst the emerging technologies, something like 3D printed habitats, not only objects. Then, of course, assessment of design frameworks that I already mentioned, and their, how to say, critical analysis through different parameters and their functionality. And as I said, to the topic of legislation, we dealt with some of the legislation in the EU and their effects in reality. For the practical exercise that I mentioned here, we wanted a holistic approach to the urban renewal, having all cultural and inclusive social cultural relations, circular considerations, and biophilic attributes. So you can see here that we have experts from all the fields: urban design, circular, landscape, social, and we are very satisfied with the results that we get from trainees, among which are some, I think, present with us today on Zoom. As my final slide, I will just show some of the names, let's say shortened, of course, for this presentation of the STSM ongoing for the VG5. You can see here from holistic urban living through envelopes, energy efficiency, smart city approaches, and similar. We really tried to cover it all, and of course look forward into the future. And with this, I would finish, and thank you everybody for your attention.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Jelena. Thank you very much. And when will the booklet be out? We're hoping April, maybe May?
Yes, end of April, beginning of May, it will be featured on the website.
Wonderful, thank you. Just going to share my screen. We're going to go for another short break, a 10-minute break. When we started this morning, I asked the question, what is possible? And I think hearing from the 5 working groups, we heard of what is possible. And so I'd urge you to download the booklets, download the publications, and move forward. Coming back after the break, we move into some local presentations here from Sabden, or just down the road in Clitheroe. And it's a big delight to welcome Richard Stevenson from Primrose in Clitheroe, but also Alison here, Clancy Rowan, and Anna, who sat next to me from Lancashire.